So I'd like to take a moment just to introduce today's workshop leads, and they're all from the Florida Public Archaeology Network, or FPAN. Our presenters include Emily Jane Murray, Sarah Miller, Robbie Boggs, and Emma Dietrich. Emily Jane Murray earned a master's degree in anthropology from Brandeis University, where she focused on public archaeology and site museums in Northeast Florida, and a bachelor's in communications from Flagler College. She has excavated sites throughout most of southeastern United States and created numerous outreach tools, including videos, activities, and museum displays. She currently works as a public archaeology coordinator for the Public Archaeology Network Northeast region, serves as the St. Johns County Cultural Resources Review Board, and is a founding member of the Florida chapter of the Association for Gravestone Studies. Her interests include Florida's prehistoric archaeology, historic cemeteries, and public archaeology and interpretation. Sarah Miller is the Regional Director for the Northeast and East Central Centers of the Florida Public Archaeology Network, hosted by Flagler College in St. Augustine. She received her master's degree in anthropology from East Carolina University in 2001, where she developed archaeology education programs at Tyrone Palace in New Bern, North Carolina. Upon graduation from East Carolina University, Ms. Miller supervised field and lab projects with public involvement for the Kentucky Archaeological Survey, as well as reviewed compliance projects for the Kentucky Heritage Council. She currently serves on the board of directors for the Society for Historical Archaeology, chair of the Society for Historical Archaeology's Heritage at Risk Committee, and the editorial board for the Journal of Archaeology and Education. Her specialties include historical archaeology, archaeology education, site stewardship, heritage at risk, advocacy, and historic cemeteries. Robbie Boggs began working for the Florida Public Archaeology Network in 2008 and currently serves as the office manager and program manager for the Northeast and East Central regions. She is a National Association for Interpretation Certified Interpretive Guide and currently serves on the boards of the St. Augustine Archaeology Association and the Talamato Cemetery Preservation Association. She has led Monitoring Monday groups for the Heritage Monitoring Scouts program and is one of the Heritage Monitoring Scouts grant administrators. Robbie earned her bachelor's degree in history and sociology from the University of Missouri. And Emma Dietrich earned her bachelor's in anthropology from Mercyhurst University and her master's in historical archaeology from the University of West Florida. Her thesis research focuses on curricula development for Milton High School's archaeology project. Before moving to the East Central region, Emma worked as a graduate assistant in the Northwest region and intern with the Midwest Archaeological Center and the Heritage Education Network. Her interests include public education and outreach, historical archaeology, and climate science. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass the virtual baton over to Sarah Miller.
Caitlin, give me a thumbs up if you can see my slide though, okay? All right. Well, thank you for that introduction, and I'll be the first out of the gates with Team FPAN today. I was looking over the participant list, and there's so many familiar names and a lot of people who have done Scout activities before. So if you're new to this today, don't worry, we're going to lay a nice foundation so you can scaffold and build more later. If you've been to an HMS workshop in the past or done scouting activities with us in the past, just look for changes because we have now, we're almost, 3/4 of the way done with this $500,000 grant we got to update the database, to do a couple 3D, a couple other things that we could not do with our normal operating funds. So you should see a lot of changes and updates that you'll want to know for future scouting and things that were really from you guys. comments on what would make things easier for the Scout experience, what would be nice so that you can cross compare with other Scouts, and especially our land managers who we love so much and want to help and have been just great partners in helping get this program up and going. And the NER is such a special place for us because a lot of these things that you're going to see were first piloted at the NER with their permission. And so it has really grown to not only a statewide program, but is now starting to get exported out of Florida and to some other states. So I'm going to share some of that with you, and then Robbie is going to take over, and then you'll hear me again before we get to other parts of our day. So this is actually our third virtual HMS workshop. So we are still refining some of the sections, and we wanted to adapt it for the State of the Reserve today. We have another one next week with the SAAA organization, a special training for them. And then we have a cadence of about once a month, we're doing virtual workshops. So if you know of somebody interested in this, or life got busy today, you have to duck out and didn't hear the thing, there will be more, so keep checking our website. We also have some resources that may have been sent out in an email, or you can get them after, or Emily Jane might put them in the chat. And we have instructions now for doing HMS monitoring. Before it was very informal, verbal conversation, or we had some blogs on how to do it, but now the state has asked us for a instructions. So all kinds of learners can take that information and have it as reference when they're out doing that in the field. And if you were a part of our Sea Level Rise workshops that built up to become these Heritage Monitoring Scout workshops, we just have a big clearinghouse of a lot of resources. So you should get an invite to that folder coming soon. So throughout the presentation, if I'm talking about something that's in the Dropbox, I'll try and give you a little alert so that you can get those handouts after. So our agenda is a little modified today. Welcome. Look, we're just about to introduction of HMS, so right on time. That will be Robbie and myself. And then we're going to do a virtual monitoring presentation. I believe that's Emily Jane. Yeah. And then Emma is going to lead you through using arches. And then we'll have some closure and evaluations. So the chat is a great place for questions, and we'll have some opportunities to have you asked during the workshop. So these are our goals. We want you to be able to identify threats to archaeological sites. Let's aim for 3 today, or 3 new ones to you if you were already aware. You're going to become familiar with the HMS program and the ARCHES system. That should be a done deal by the end of our 2 hours. And we would like you guys to be signed up as HMS Scouts and ready to be assigned some sites. And Emily Jane has some follow-up information on sites you can get involved with in our now pandemic version of doing this with the public, which we're still doing, just very different than we used to with the come all party we used to have. If you're not familiar with Florida Public Archaeology Network, we exist to help protect the state's buried past through education and outreach. And that used to be a lot of development in mind 15 years ago when FPAN started, but that has really shifted. And in the light of impacts from climate change, that this is a really core part of our mission now, and looking out to how we can do education outreach today, help local governments such as the NER and the FWC and the WMA, other agencies, and also assist the state's Division of Historical Resources. So we'll talk about some of that throughout. In a normal workshop format, we would ask you just to think about where you are with climate change in Florida. And is this something you are, just observing, seeing in headlines, looking at some social media articles? Are you joining organizations, so moving up the pyramid to be an advocate and more either vocalize or take some citizen science action? Or are you leading these kind of programs and different citizen science kind of programs? So we just want you to recognize today where you're at in this engagement pyramid, and just to challenge you to think about how you might move up a step or two. Or if you're all the way up at the top leading, how you might go back and help others to gain a foothold or two. Because this is a long process. You don't just jump right into it and know everything there is about climate change in Florida. So wherever you are at today, it's a come as you are party, but just think about what are the tools, what are the questions I need to be asking to go from the level I'm at today to, you know, a level or two up. I went backwards. That's how into that I got with the leading. What is HMS Florida? Robbie, is this you?
Yeah, that's me.
All right, we're switching to Robbie.
Well, HMS Florida, if you want to go to the next one, Sarah, was born out of our cemetery resource protection training program. So this is another training program that we offer that really focuses on protecting Florida's historic cemeteries. And during one of these sessions, Adrienne Burke up in Fernandina Beach was worried about Bosque Bello and bringing up concerns she had about sea level rise and, you know, how endangered that cemetery was and what would happen, how to deal with it in the management plan. And we just thought, well, that is an excellent question. So out of that question and working with Adrienne, we started looking at maps and making models and projections around the state about looking at not just cemeteries, but all of our historic resources and how sea level rise could be endangering them. And out of those concerns, one of the primary things we came up with was monitoring of what can we do now, where sometimes it can feel rather helpless, but we really knew that kind of the more eyeballs we have on the sites, the better. And if we can track these sites, we can really get some incredibly valuable information. On the bottom right there, you'll see probably a familiar looking, if you've ever been to the bathroom in a gas station or a convenience store, you see these bathroom monitoring forms. And that's really what we found to be the most accurate parallel to what we're trying to do. Because on these forms, you can see who last monitored, what time they were there, what date, how frequently it's been monitored, and it maybe could tell you the story of what's happening in that bathroom. So maybe it's kind of a slow demise through use, or maybe something at 1 p.m. happened that was rather dramatic due to vandalism or what have you. But there you can have a picture of the condition of what's happening in that bathroom. And that's really the same concept when we're monitoring archaeological sites. Up there in the right corner, that's just really a dramatic picture showing a pre and post Hurricane Matthew and some of the beach damage that was done down in Summerhaven, down by Matanzas. Here I talked about some of these models we started looking at and making. The map on the left is just kind of a basic bathtub model that's showing a lot of our cultural resources and the amount that would be impacted through different levels of sea level rise. So you see the red dots, and that's just 1 meter of sea level rise. And you see there we have about 16,000 of our cultural resources that could be affected. And almost 3,000 of those, we're looking at archaeological sites. Now, if we raise that bathtub model up to 2 meters, we add the yellow dots in there. And now we can see things almost double to where we're looking at almost 35,000 cultural resources that could be potentially affected. And now we're looking at almost 4,000 archaeological sites that would be endangered of being damaged. Now, the map on the right is a little more sophisticated map that was done by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And theirs is looking at the light blue and dark blue colors are where you can see the really emphasis on the sea level rise damage that potentially can be done. And here, I like this illustration because you can see it's not just coastal, but the inland sites through the rivers and even the water table could be affected as well. So the big question, well, we're all here today about what exactly is HMS Florida. So the Heritage Monitoring Scouts program It's on the most basic level, a statewide citizen science program that is for monitoring heritage at-risk sites. So as I was saying, the more people we can get out to these sites, the more eyeballs we can get on them, the safer they are. Another basic level is really just confirming that the site, the information that we have in the Florida Master Site File is correct. And we'll be going into the Florida Master Site File a bit later, but this is really a statewide database that is the foundation for protecting these sites. But from our monitoring efforts, we found that a lot of these sites have not been updated since they were first listed in the Florida Master Site File in the 1950s. Now, clearly, there's been a lot of changes since the 1950s, so there's a lot of updating to be done. We also noticed that some of these sites were not mapped in the right place. So, for example, the largest shell mound on the East Coast, Turtle Mound, we discovered was not mapped in the correct location. So now this is Turtle Mound is a part of the Canaveral National Seashore, but you can imagine that if the site is not under the protection of the National Park Service, like Turtle Mound thankfully was, and we don't know its exact location, it could be at risk to be damaged due to development or any other number of things. The other really important factor with the HMS program is that we can gather this information and we can have a collective database to be able to help land managers and make management plans and really track the changes that are happening in these endangered sites. So here we're seeing the impacts of flooding on the left. We're seeing this is a model showing the historic cemeteries that are endangered due to sea level rise. You can see the dots all along, almost every county along the coast has endangered historic cemeteries. We have 101 in Duval, 45 in Nassau, and here in St. Johns County, we have 44 endangered historical cemeteries. But these threats aren't just through sea level rise, but sometimes just basic storm surge, like here on the upper right, you can see in Jacksonville during Hurricane Irma, very dramatic pictures. And on the bottom right in Fort Lauderdale, this is just the results of an extremely high tide. So most of you, since you're here with the GTM, are probably familiar with this site here, which is Shell Bluff Landing, located right there on the GTM. And Shell Bluff Landing is an archaeology site that contains centuries of layers of human habitation. And this includes a coquina block well that was built by Menorcans in the early 1800s. Now this picture here was taken in July 2005. So y'all can try to keep this mental image in your head as we go to the next slide. And this demonstrates why Shell Bluff Landing has really become the HMS poster child because of these dramatic pictures. Up on the upper left, September 28, 2016, we took this picture really just to show the long-term effects of erosion. And we took it for a workshop that was coming up, really having no idea that the crazy hurricane season of the next couple of years was about to hit us. But lo and behold, it did. And we have October 12th, 2016, just a few weeks later. This was post-Hurricane Matthew. And just after that one storm, we lost 4 feet of bluff line on Shell Bluff Landing. And the well was exposed 3 to 4 feet. Now, instead of just 8 inches, it used to just be 8 inches above the ground, but now the land was stripped away from it, and 3 to 4 feet of that well were now exposed. Now, on the lower left quadrant, we jump ahead to September 15th, 2017. Now, this was post-Hurricane Irma. So now we're adding another hurricane on top of Matthew, where we lose another 2 to 3 feet of Shell Bluff's midden material, and 1 to 2 more feet of the well became exposed. Now, September 20th, 2017, 17 over there, you're seeing another, how the tide line is now almost up right at the base of the bluff. And we just sort of keep eroding more and more, losing more of the land. And you can see that the well is just almost completely stripped, where you can see it laid bare. And in the next slide, we can really see that well. So there you can see these two pre and post pictures up in the tiny corner, just a little bit of it that was exposed. It was high up on the bluff, gradually eroding, but then just after a couple of these storms, it's just almost sitting in the water and almost completely exposed. So this is really, we were just so thankful to have these pictures before the hurricanes, just so thankful to have these points of comparison and to see what it looked like before. And again, just really illustrating the importance of monitoring. Now, the impacts of storm events aren't always from sea level rise. There can also be a lot of damage that's done from wind from hurricanes. You can see on the lower left, that's a lot of things that we do look out for in cemeteries when the limbs come crashing down on the markers. And then the basic flooding, especially with the high water tables that we have here in Florida, can cause a lot of damage. And just here you can see these vaults have just been picked up and moved, basically. Pretty amazing. Oh, so it was from the tornadoes, they were saying, the Huguenot. Wow. And you can see in the upper right that the washout from A1A after Hurricane Matthew. And this is something, another thing that we have to look at on these maps, because we're not just looking at the effects that the flooding or sea level rise will have on the historic resources, but sometimes our ability to get out there is going to be impacted. So when we're looking at these models, sometimes we might see not just that the sites are threatened, but our ability to get there is also threatened, and prevents us to be able to keep an eye on them. And on the lower right, you see our own Sarah Miller there trying to do some quick monitoring before it gets reburied or washed out to sea. They're on Talbot Island there on a shipwreck that is no longer there. So thankfully we have it, at least the information now. And submerged resources are also a part of our monitoring program. I'm sure if we were there now on GTM Live, we could take a walk down the parking lot and look at the spring break wreck that was washed up in March of 2018. I believe it was called that just because it was during the time of spring break, and they had many people coming to view that wreck once it became exposed after the storm. You can see that can sometimes have its own special challenges with submerged resources, because as soon as they're exposed, sometimes they're washed ashore, sometimes they are just exposed because they were under the sand, like the one you just saw Sarah with at Talbot. But once it hits the air, it immediately starts deteriorating. So it's really kind of a race against time to get this information documented and preserved for future, because it's hard to make it last. As you can see from the spring break wreck that is now on GTM, the challenges it's been there, because there's a lot of times there's not the funding, there's not the resources to really be able to maintain it, and it starts to slowly erode. So that's kind of a basic overview of what monitoring is all about, but I'll pass it back to Sarah to go over really the nuts and bolts of what's involved.
Nuts and bolts and nuts of monitoring. And we'll go through a few things, but just visually give yourself a little foundation, because then Emily Jane's going to show a video that puts a lot of this into practice and further with Emma. So we'll start to drill down here. So just capture some basics of what we're doing as the activity when we go out. First thing you really need to know is you need to know what land you're on and if you have permission to be there. The NER has state land components. We ourselves now have a permit to go out and survey. So there are laws that apply on the state and federal level that protect these sites. And some sites we need permits, some we don't. So when in doubt, check with us and we'll help you to know if you need an archaeologist with you, especially on state land. Make sure you have permission and are with an archaeologist or a land manager. And then some of the federal sites don't want permits, some do, and then a lot of city and county sites, as long as they're open to the public and interpreted, they're generally good with that. But important to know there are some laws that protect archaeological sites, even from something as benign as a photo. If you go out to Shell Bluff and you think it's a pretty place and you want to take all the pictures of your family you want, or your shoes, or whatever bug just crawled up, go for it. That's great, that's recreation. When you're conducting a scientific activity, state of Florida currently wants you to either be a land manager, be with them, or have a permit to do so, to collect even a photograph for information. So just be aware of that. We don't want any of our scouts arrested under Class D felonies. It would not be a good look for you or for us. So we can help guide you to which sites are appropriate. And if any of you are land managers, knock yourself out, obviously, with your sites, because you are the managers of those sites, and we have a platform and Arches built just for you. The Florida Master Site File form, anything that is in Arches has a form, has been recorded. So we get a lot of questions like, well, what do we do about a site we discover when we're out monitoring? That's awesome, let's record it. But it's not gonna be in Arches because we kind of had to define going from the known to the unknown. So the site files is what the database is built on. And as was previously mentioned, some of these site forms, I think the oldest one we've seen was like a card filled out in the late 1800s. Yeah, some things have updated since then. And we're finding if sites haven't been updated in the last 10 years, they really need one because of new ways we locate sites, new definitions, and the boundaries are changing a lot to expand. So just be aware the database is made from the Florida Master Site File, and that's usually what we're looking at when we go out to monitor a site and some of the information that's available in Arches. So to monitor, you have to become a scout. That's an easy step. General info, maybe raise your hands if you're already a scout. If you were a scout and used the old Google form, we're just asking people to re-register in Arches because it helps track scouts and who was there on that day in a more refined, more elegant way. So there's the instructions on how to create an account, pretty easy to do. And then you can use the database when you're in there. You can be assigned sites, like if you are a volunteer at the NER, you can have those sites assigned to you in partnership with them to monitor. If you're a land manager, we have specific land manager accounts that you and your team can log in and collect the information you've been collecting all the while, but now it's just in a more centralized system statewide. And photos, that's a big jump in the last few years. We used to have people emailing us photos. Now you can upload them into the system. You're gonna get a demo on that, I think, in a little bit. And that is so helpful because like you saw with Shell Bluff, what we're trying to do is express change over time in all those dynamics. Sometimes we know the data we want as we're taking the photo. Sometimes we don't know until the after, like, oh, it became real critical where that tree was in that previous photo. So the photos are so helpful. And to scouts who are going out to these sites, you can go out blind to them, but even better, what did it look like last time? What's the change you saw? What's the thing you're tracking? So the next person goes out and can get you the same oriented photo. So that's been a big upgrade to help land managers and scouts. We do have another resource on our site, an online cemetery map. The thing I use it for is, it was frustrating for a while to get assigned Osbello, get all the way home and realize, oh wait, there were other cemeteries, other sites nearby. Cemeteries are exempt from the clauses that keep archaeological site locations protected. So, sorry, I live near the hospital, so you may hear a helicopter. I'm okay, I'm okay. cemeteries are exempt, so we can't broadly give everybody all the points of data for all the archaeological sites in Florida, but we can for cemeteries. And if you have volunteers or you yourself are interested in getting going, this is a great place to practice and refine your monitoring skills. And they're all the 1,200 dots of cemeteries across Florida are available to you. We have one woman, Chris Nolan. I can't even tell you. I think she's done like 80 cemetery updates, and she's submitted almost that many in new cemetery forms that she has found that weren't in the system. The other thing I like about the cemetery map is that you can click on different parts that will show you the sea level rise and the storm surge. So sometimes if I'm out, let's say even at the NER, I might click on this map while I'm out there just to see what is going to happen. Because it's not just that the site will be underwater or not, access to the site may completely go away with a 3 to 6 foot rise. So that's just a good thing as you're getting used to being out and about and monitoring. This is the site form as it was, and maybe still is. It's been updated a little bit, and we have a paper form for you to take out, but you're gonna see it's all integrated online. And very soon we hope to have the app so you can be out in the field and use the app to be paperless in the field. But even yesterday, we took some paper forms out with us. And when we're going as a group, it's nice to kind of have the paper to jot down quick notes. So this is what we just want people to do. The most important thing, as Robbie mentioned, is could you find the site? Is it where it's supposed to be? Because if not, already you need to do a site form update and then go through the condition. This is the only part the state of Florida required us to have in the form was this good, fair, poor, because it ties into their arm training, definitions, and other site stewardship. And then these are those threats. So we said identify 3 threats today. Maybe look for ones you knew about, but ones that are new to you. And if you want to see them, just go to Shell Bluff Landing. You'll probably see all of them at one time. And a lot of our coastal sites have all these threats ongoing. Do mark what you observed that day. I can get real creative what I think has happened in the past, what I think might happen in the future. Sure, a tornado could hit anything at any time, but try and indicate what you observed that day, and that will help us track those changes. And also the artifacts where they are, and they're going to go through this in the video. Taking photos. If you are comfortable with take photos, go off and do it. Some people need more definition than go take photos. So some guidelines. Remember large macro ideas and micro ideas when you're taking photos. So when you get to a site, let's say a cemetery, go to all 4 sides taking pictures towards the center of the cemetery. Because again, you don't know what tree is going to go down. You don't know where the truck is going to plow through the fence. So take large scale photos, at least one from each direction, and then go into the middle of the cemetery and take the same pictures in the opposite direction. We did this at Sanchez Mound in the NER, go to the mountain, go to different sites on the outside, and then up on the top, take photos the same directions going down. We do have these cards. What we kept getting when we wanted photos of artifacts was pictures of artifacts in the hands. Why? Because like Google archaeology artifacts, probably 90% of them are going to be in somebody's hand. It's just natural to pick it up and hold it, and it looks so visually nice to have it in your hand. But 2 things, as a point of scientific data, it doesn't really help us know the scale or where it was located and the context. And secondly, it's very important to leave artifacts where they are. This is not a collection program. This is a documentation program. So we want to leave all artifacts in place, and we have these printed cards, and maybe we can work out how to get them to you. I know the NER has a bunch, but if you don't have one, we'll mail one to you. We feel this passionate about it. I now have one, look, in my phone wallet, just so I have it at all times to show which way is north, the orientation, and then the scale, and then a shameless plug for HMS Scout. So you can have your own. You could maybe try charging your bar tab to it. It could work. I don't know. work that out. But if you're taking the photos, just remember people aren't always going to know the point you're looking at. If you're looking at an artifact, make sure to scale out and scale in a little bit so they know where that artifact is. And here's an example of there's a pen in this middle shot with the pen, but you wouldn't even know looking at the pen in the shell where it was. So try to do that. We used to have a photo log. If you like to take copious notes and drive yourself crazy and forget you took a photo and have to redo it all, then go for it. Photo logs are for you. But we are in love with this app called SOLOCATOR. It's, what is it? I think we worked out yesterday, $1.99 to download.
It's 99 cents to buy the basic app, and then it's an additional $3.99 to upgrade to where you can input notes. So it becomes a total of basically $5.
And we love it so much. If you are a volunteer for HMS, we will like reimburse you the cost. The reason is, look at that. It gives us coordinates. It gives us elevation. It lets us, if you're like me and take a billion pictures, like headstones and cemeteries. I have so many, I don't know where I am. So here, sorry, my screen is behind you. We've got our site number. This is across from Vale Point Park. Those who are local, it's one of the few that I've seen like Gambian boxes that are used near here. And looking at this erosion defense, Moultrie Branch Midden, the date, the time, all that is for you. So you don't have to worry as much about your photo log. And sometimes our program will glitch and photos will go somewhere else, and our data manager can catch it in a second, but we'll know right where it goes without having to track through what happened. And this is a system. You're going to get familiar with it in just a minute, but it's a big upgrade. I hope you all feel, who have been doing HMS for a while, to go from paper forms and us leading you to the sites, which was always fun. It was just the Google Doc wasn't very sophisticated for seeing that you were part of the statewide program. So now you can go in, you can see cemeteries across Florida, you can be assigned sites. And if you are a land manager, you'll have access to sites on the properties you manage and even be able to assign some of those sites to others. So we'll pause for questions as I take my slideshow down, and the next one comes up, I think, is Emily Jane. Any questions before moving on?
And you can either type them into the chat box, raise your physical hand if your camera's on, or if you can find your virtual hand, you can raise that as well.
And some might be easier after you see the video of seeing things in action. But if we haven't lost you yet, fantastic.
Abby, I see your virtual hand, or your physical hand.
I just had a comment. I was out at Shell Bluff about a month or so ago, and I was kicking myself that I didn't have my handy dandy HMS card with me, but I like the idea of putting it in a phone wallet or something similar like that.
Yeah. Maybe FPAN will get to the point someday where like, we'll send you this free iPhone with a scale in there. Yeah, and if you don't have one, just even putting in a pen or your watch or a quarter or anything for scale. And if you think about it, if you can point the pen north, that, you know, that treads. It's pretty effective, but the pictures are nice. Is there a sign up calendar for cemetery monitoring? There is and there isn't. As we get closer to hurricane season, Robbie heads up the going out to monitor cemeteries before. So yes, there will be. We also have in our grant right now sites that we need to monitor. So we are roughly going out Mondays and Wednesdays, but I think Emily Jane, are you going to cover that in some how to sign up?
Yeah, I have a whole slide full of some dates that we will be out, and the two answers are to get updates of any events that we have on. If you sign up for the program, you will get on the mailing list, and it will have a monthly email that has some dates for when we're doing things. But if you want to come out with us like next week, you can send me an email, and I'll put it in the box there, and we'll be out at some local state parks. So.
And fun fact, the first Scout update, we call them Scout updates. The first one I sent from my office, like with our first day back after Matthew. I was like, Scout update 1. But now we're up to like Scout update 70, and we keep them very limited to once a month for the whole state, so we don't junk up your inbox. But each site update, am I feeling your thunder, MJ? Has like a leaderboard just to encourage those who are doing it. Keep on going. Heads up, it's usually Chris Nolan up at the top. Has a resource, so things that we found really helpful and adding to our literacy on climate change and heritage, and then has different training opportunities and lectures. Awesome. Well, I will pass it to MJ.
All right. Well, this is the part where we would go out and run around in the woods and have fun together. But guess what? We're all now slaves to our computers, more so than we ever were before. So I'm going to take you virtually out to Shell Bluff Landing as best I can. And we can all just shut our eyes and pretend we're there. So we'll play a video for you guys, and then we'll chat a little bit about how you monitor a site.
Hi guys, so we're out here today at Shell Bluff Landing to work on some site monitoring. So I have my monitoring buddy, I have my HMS form, I have my photo scale card and a pencil and a camera to take some photos. So all the equipment that we need. Shell Bluff Landing is a 6,000-year-old shell midden, so you can see kind of the stretch of the bluff line here with all of the shell midden, and we see that it's used to the historic period as well. We do have a Menorcan well that's here in the fence. And it's right on the ICW, so we do see a lot of changes here at the site, so it's one we monitor often. So the first things on the monitoring form is, who are you? Your Master Scout ID. So this is something that you'll receive when you sign up to become a Scout. It should be your first initial, your middle initial, and your last name. And then the next two questions are the name of the site and the site ID number. So we, as I said, are at Shell Bluff Landing, and this is 8SJ32.
The next thing on our monitoring form is our time of day, date, and our site location. Why this is important is because we can figure out when the last time you were at the site or someone before you. We can also use the time to figure out how high the tide was at the time at that date. And our section for our site location has 3 check marks where it's like your site location is verified, the site could not be found, or you found it but found it in a different location. And that is just for us to be able to figure out if our mapping or our coordinates information is correct.
So the next question is the Scout Visit Condition Assessment. And your options for this are good, fair, or poor. So this is something that can move around a little bit. You know, sometimes like we came out here after a hurricane and we lost a whole lot of shoreline and we're like, oh, it's very, very poor. But as the site kind of stabilized into the new normal, maybe it becomes fair again. So you want to look at, you know, is the site stable? What are the threats that you currently see, and kind of take all of that into account to figure out what condition you think the site is in.
And then our following section is threats observed, and you can check as many that apply. And the key here is that these are threats that are observable. So we have active erosion, vegetation growth, and other kind of pre-selected options for you. And it just makes sure that they are things that you can see, you're not assuming is happening. So we can't necessarily assume wind is happening at every site, but if you're out there and you can see evidence of wind damage, then you can select wind. Then there's a box that says describe your threats here, and that's where you can go into more detail about what you're observing and the threats that you see at this site.
So the next thing to look at are the artifacts that you may see at the site. And so we have a checkbox list here of the different types of artifacts you may see: pre-contact pottery, historic ceramics, shell tools, glass, architectural features, all sorts of things. So you can just check the boxes that you see. There is a space where you can describe other artifacts. If you don't know the specific types of ceramic or the specific types of shells or animal remains, just take a few photos and that can help us identify it, at a later date. But if you do have that information, you can include some more thorough notes.
You should always photograph artifacts in place, preferably with a photo scale or another easily recognizable object as a size reference. We recommend taking 2 photos, one close up to get the details of the object, and a second from a bigger angle that allows us to see where the artifact was located on the site.
Next up, we have our site's comment section, and this is a blank box for you to up more information on what you saw overall happening at the site. This is an area where you can elaborate on active threats or site impacts or some of the artifacts that you've seen, and it can also include storm information. If you're monitoring after a storm, include that in this section. And then following that, we have our site priority, which is a bit subjective. We have listed out high, medium, and low. These are meant to be a little bit broad because if it's a high priority site for you, that is still important information. So these are kind of at levels where you think if you need to monitor once every year, every 5 years, or after a storm, this is where you can kind of mark high, medium, or low threats.
So the final 2 sections are recommendations, and we did give you a couple of options if you want to suggest that somebody comes back and does a repeat visit or adds coastal defense or a Florida Master Site File update. And then just a section for you to leave any last final evaluation remarks you may have. We do ask that you contact your local FPAN representative if you find that the site file information is not correct. So if it's in a different location or if something's changed drastically and we need to update the site file, or if you find evidence of looting or vandalism, because then we can contact the proper authorities to deal with that.
In addition to filling out the monitoring form, we also request that people take photos of the site. Photos should include some general overview shots as well as any unique features or observed threats or impact. Keep in mind that someone may navigate back to find problematic areas using these photographs, so try to capture notable landmarks.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about the Heritage Monitoring Scouts program, visit our website, fpan.us.
All right, so that's the basics of monitoring. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Or I see something happen in the chat box.
I see, Vicki, you've got your physical hand raised if you want to come off of mute.
Yeah, I just was wondering, is there a way to look up and tell when the last time somebody had been to a particular site was? If you're just sort of, maybe out doing this so you don't go the next day after somebody has just been there?
There is, and we'll hopefully, we had a few technical errors with our ARCHES system, but I think we've gotten them sorted out so we can show you, if you get into the ARCHES database, you'll be able to see the previous scout reports and, when they were when the site was last monitored, and, hopefully they'll have photos in there as well that you can see, that people may have taken at that point, so.
I was going to say that's a real improvement over time, because those who participated in the early version and you submitted the form, you weren't able to see other people's form. But now, and hold on to your hat, I think the most monitored site probably is Shell Bluff Landing with like 26 entries, because you don't want to be there right the day after, but the nor'easter comes in and all of a sudden the day after is when you want to be there, so you can capture what happened. So you can now see previous visits to that site as long as that site is assigned to you.
Well, if you can see the photos, you can probably tell if it's, if it's changed much, then maybe you should go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and our strategy was at first opportunistic. Like if you happen to be there, go ahead and say a monitor, it looked fine, but now it's a little more reactive, proactive. I'll mute myself because we have another great presentation.
Yeah, and I was just gonna comment, you know, like I think a site like Shell Bluff Landing, you can't, there is no monitoring it too much because so much of it just changes every day. So, you know, maybe something like a safe and well-maintained cemetery seems a little silly to go back out again and again, but like something like Shell Bluff Landing, you find different artifacts that have eroded every day. And I mean, the shoreline's just so active and, you know. All right, well, with that, I'm gonna let Emma take over and show us the magic that is arches.
Yep, so I'm gonna share the screen and we're gonna go through, like we just monitored the site. We're gonna go back to our office space and we are going to fill in the form that we filled out. Now, like Emily Jane was saying, we've had some technical glitches. So fingers crossed, I'm going to attempt to see if we can monitor the site that we wanted to monitor. If not, we're gonna monitor our cemetery. So this is the site you're going to see when you pull up our website, the hms.fpan.us. And if you, this is also where you sign up to be a scout. So if you haven't done that, you can quick fill out and agree to the ethics that you're not going to loot and destroy archaeological sites. I think all of us are stewards here. So we're going to log into our scout portal and you'll get a scout ID number. And we sign right in. And so this is your first page where it gives you information on downloading your site forms. And it also gives you step-by-step instructions on how to log a visit. So we're going to jump right in and explore the database. And we are going to cross your fingers for me, just see if our site will work. So we're planning to log a visit at the Spanish Coquina queries, which is SJ 3069. We'll cross fingers here, but I don't think it's going to work for us. Nope. Our tech people are on it. I've been getting text messages this entire time. So instead, we're going to go monitor a cemetery. So if you look at your map, this is what you'll see if you were to create an account right now. We will assign you archaeological sites, but if you're to zoom in, all of these purple, too far. All of these little purple guys are historic structures, while the orange are historic cemeteries. So we're going to go for Talamato Cemetery. So we can search in the search bar for Talamato Cemetery, and it zooms us right in. We talked about previous site reports, so we can click on this report made by the lovely Boggs, who's in our video right now, or in our Zoom session. So you can see previous photos that were taken, and you can see her whole entire report here. I think it's good, any sort of issues that she's seen. And so you can go back through and monitor these cemeteries and see when the last time someone was out there. So technically the last time someone monitored was almost a year ago. So end of next month, it'll be 1 year since the last time someone monitored Talamato. So we're gonna exit out of that report, and we're just going to click on our Talamato, and it brings up all of the other reports that have been done previously. So Robbie's been out there the most. I'm not entirely sure who this is, but also Emily Jane. So a lot more FPAN people out here monitoring. So we're going to click the create a new report, and all of this stuff pops right up, and you have your work tree here in the corner. So your first step is to get your Florida site ID, which I managed to forget already, but surprise, surprise, it's right here. Your site ID is an alphanumeric system. So for Talamato, it's SJ02469. So you need to remember that. So we go to SJ02469, and it pops right up as Talamato. So as we're adding Talamato, the biggest thing, you have to click the add button after every step. And then once you do, it will drop down with your information. If you don't hit add, it's not going to save. Then we go to our visit arrival information, the same thing that's on our form here. So it's very easy to walk through these trees. You fill out your scout ID, And anyone else who joined you in the field, even if they don't have a Scout ID, you can still type in their name to have a record of, because they might make a Scout ID when you go home, and our database manager will see that and just automatically change it. So since this is a trial, my cat is on my keyboard right now, so we will put in Lucia Cat. This is our initial or follow-up. Since I'm filling out the form and I monitored this, I'm telling you guys, I cheated a little bit. I did not go to the site. I got photos off of previous visits, but we're going to go with initial because this is the first time I would be monitoring the site. I'm not a morning person, so we're going to go in the afternoon, and we're going to say we went yesterday, because I'm going to be a little honest. I normally wait a little bit after I fill out these site forms. Now, Talamato, we want to make sure we've been to the site, go through our location sites. Location site is verified. I don't think we're going to have any issues finding Talamato. You can add any notes that you need to. So if you're monitoring an archaeological site that you think we found the site, but actually on the map, it looks like it might be like 3 or 4 meters to the north, you can click on site found, but in a different direction, and make that note here. Feel free to explain anything away. And again, critical, hitting that add button. Our next is our site condition assessment. We are going to assume that Talamato is pretty good and stable if it doesn't have a truck driving through it. And we're going to go through and think about any sort of issues we noticed on site. So if this was right after the truck driving through, we would have vehicle damage. Visitor traffic, if you notice any litter or paths or things, people are always visiting the cemetery. When cemeteries, checking for gopher tortoise burrows, because gopher tortoises love cemeteries. So if we see evidence of that, you click it. If not, you leave it alone. And then vegetation growth is pretty common. So this is, either trees, vines, anything like that. And again, you can explain away your threats. And I'll put in truck drove through the gate about a year ago, but time doesn't matter anymore. So you look for visible artifacts. So if we were out at Shell Bluff, we would 100% be seeing shell midden. We'll see prehistoric pottery. We'd be seeing historic pottery and a whole bunch of other goodies. So you go through and click all your little buttons. Since we're at a cemetery, we have grave markers, and I'm going to assume we would have some grave goods too. So I'm going to click other and say grave goods. And that could just be basic information. And then we go into our site impact comments. So this is what to further elaborate on any threats that you've seen or noticed. So we'll go through and say site is visited by tourists. Ignore my typing skills at the moment. Visitor traffic could be an issue. And then we click our add button, but you can elaborate as much as you want to in that section. Our next, we go into our site priorities. So this is our subjective high, medium, or low. And that also depends on how you're feeling about the site. I might say this site is, low or medium priority in my mind, because it is well visited. It has its own association. But if your ancestors are buried in Talamato Cemetery, you might think it's a high priority. So that is completely okay. So recommendations, I will say repeat visit after storms, or when someone drives a truck through it. Now for Shell Bluff, I would think I'd put that as a high priority, because you guys have a lot more active erosion. You have a lot more loss that's happening at a faster rate than we would see at Talamato. And again, hitting that add button. Our last, if we were monitoring a structure, we'd go through and fill out this, but it screams structure only. So if you're going to go out and monitor those sites, you just include this information like current address and its current use. Then the best part about the ARCHES database is uploading photos. So you have your photo type options. You have a close-up. So if you're taking a close-up image of an artifact, you'd select that. Overview, general photos of the landscape, of their site, etc. Unique features, which I think is mostly for structures, or like a unique feature of the site. You can click that. In this case, we're going to go for our overview. And you can either drag and drop, or you can select files, which I think I have saved in pictures. If you guys can see this, I apologize. And you just select your photos and click open. And so your photos are here. You notice that they say unsaved. What you have to do is you can enter the comments, which I'm just going to write old photos. I'm going to delete this monitoring form after I submit it all, but clicking add. Again, that's the important part. I forget this all the time when it comes to the photos, because we'll get the spinning wheel of death and it will upload those photos into the database. And now I can actually download those images onto a different computer. Someone else can download them so they can take photos out in the field to relook for those artifacts or for that information. And so we are good. We have successfully filled out a monitoring form. I will go back through and delete later on, but if I were to refresh our arches and cross your fingers, nothing happens, and go to Tolomato again, we should see my record here for myself and Lucia monitoring the site. And so when you click through, you'll be able to see the photos that we uploaded, which are general overviews, and all of our information from our site visit. So I will stop my share here after I part the fur of my cat so I can actually see everything. Or maybe not. Oh, there we go. The stop share is on my other screen. Technical difficulties, folks. We've been doing this for almost a year and I still can't figure it out. So that's basically everything about arches. It is very intuitive, but the best thing is when you're having any sort of issues, you have an FPAN person who's normally always on a computer these days. You can send a quick email to and we can help you out. So does anyone have questions for the arches database? Anything you want to see again? Taking the silence that you guys got it.
Well, it's undoubtedly funner to do it in person, but we will get some of these basics hammered out so that we can gather together and do in groups, but you can also do individually. MJ, did you want to give one more plug for people who want to get monitoring some of the open days?
Yes, let me.
Am I interrupting? Was that coming? I'm a thunder stealer. I love to jump ahead to sections already.
Oh. Hold on. There we go. Now I have it ready. Yes, so we have some exciting monitoring days. So we are currently focused on monitoring at Talbot Island State Parks, which they are all kind of, there's a bunch of parks that are kind of managed collectively. So Big and Little Talbot, Fort George Island, they have like a Pumpkin Hill Preserve, Yellow Bluff Fort Park. So we're aiming to go up to some of those sites on a couple of Mondays. And then on Wednesdays, we'll be staying closer to home here in St. Johns County, if you're with us in St. Johns County. So next week, we're going to head out to Fish Island. We'll go back to Anastasia State Park on the 10th. And we are tentatively aiming to get out to Fort Mose Bay on the 24th. So if you're interested in any of those dates, I'm going to put my email up. I put it in the chat box. I'll show it to you in a second. And then we're gonna keep monitoring at the GTM Research Reserve. It's one of our favorite places to come visit. And so any opportunity to come hang out there, I love it. The reserve themselves put out some calls to go monitor sites this summer, and I'm sure there will be more of those opportunities, so you can keep your eyes peeled for anything Shannon may send around as they coordinate some of their own efforts. But we have in the works the Great Walkabout Round 2, and I think Susan joined us for part of Round 1. And it's this ridiculously ambitious project where if you look at the photo here, All of those yellow outlines are archaeological sites. And in, I'm like, well, let's go and walk all of these long archaeological sites. And then you'll see there's, not a lot of shoreline left in between. So last February, we walked around the entire peninsula, and Caitlin and Abby joined us, and Sarah and Robbie. And so they will tell you, and Susan will tell you what great fun we had. So we hope to keep kind of doing that every year or so, just to kind of keep track of the shoreline, and not just, we're defining shoreline as the erosional edge. So when you go out to Shell Bluff Landing and you see like that bluff and things are starting to fall out of the side of it, that's what we're mapping. But we found a lot of really cool things on this project. We found marsh grasses growing way up amongst pine trees, which is some interesting evidence of like marsh migration and things like that. So we are in talks. We will announce those dates when we get them sorted out, but hopefully in March, and hopefully no later than April, because it's going to get pretty warm and no one wants to go hang out with all those pygmies that are out sunning themselves in July, right? So that will be coming up. We do have limited space for some of these things. We used to just invite anyone and everyone who wanted to join us at any time, but we're trying to keep groups smaller now because of COVID. So we only have space for a handful of volunteers for any of these days. We are driving separately and meeting at locations, and then some of the NERD projects are a little easier because you just park once and everyone walks around from there. But driving separately where that's needed, definitely wearing masks the entire time, avoiding going indoor together, and trying to space out as we do the field work. So we are taking all of those kinds of precautions. So once again, you can send me an email if you're interested in joining us on any of those dates. Most of them we're kind of doing, starting in the morning and doing either a half day or a full day, depending on who can make it and what's on the agenda for the day. And then, as I say, you can sign up to become a scout, and that puts you on the mailing list, and you can learn about more exciting opportunities as we get back out into the field and continue working on some of these great projects. So I can stop sharing. I can put dates back up. I see there were comments in the chat box that I could never seem to find when I start sharing my screen.
Yeah, I put, there's a good question about cemetery monitoring. And just know this is very new. We're a program of UWF, and they did not allow us to do any public programming. So this is really, as soon as they said, okay, you can go X amount of miles with X amount of people, we just started. So you are fresh getting some new dates and how we're trying to manage that. Many of us have had shot one, and I hope you guys have too, just so we know as a liability, we don't want to be a vector for disease control out of FPN. So we're working hard to keep everyone safe, and we do have masks to give people should one go awry or something. So thanks for your patience on that, because usually we're like, yeah, we're out every Monday and keep coming, but now we're just getting a little slow into that, as well as our grant that has permits that are going to expire. So we kind of had to front load getting out to sites, because normally, yes, we would be out at cemeteries at least once a month. So Robbie will be doing that pending anything reversing or whatever might come next, bees, locusts. We'll start getting out with some regular cemetery monitoring. And we'd love to have you, because the cemeteries are, I think, really safe. You get a lot of information, and yes, the volunteers are just the best. So just email Robbie. Robbie, you want to say a few words about the monitoring you've done before hurricane season?
Yeah, a lot of times in the fall, we really try to cover a lot of the cemeteries. Several that I like to keep an eye on are lesser known African-American cemeteries here in St. Johns County that tend to get kind of forgotten, and not like Tullamato, that are very well preserved and have a lot of eyeballs on them. We kind of try to get out to some of these lesser known cemeteries and monitor those and see what states they're in, and always make a push to at least get out there twice a year to do a pre-hurricane season and a post-hurricane season checkup. And that's proved to be, now we have a couple of years of data on those cemeteries now, which is a pretty cool thing.
And I was going to give a plug because this is a group interested in such things. HMS, we have plans to expand HMS outside of Florida. We've been asked to for Georgia and South Carolina. So we are aligning with other states. This is kind of exciting potentially for the national estuary systems where other places have a need for this kind of citizen science monitoring, which probably happens all over for environmental resources, but for heritage resources is a little more scarce to find. So I put in a link in the chat to our Nahar page, and this is kind of one layer beyond FPAN, so I don't mean to confuse people, but I think you'd be interested to see that coming out of Florida and going north, and ooh, nice logo designed by Emma Dietrich. Thank you, Emma. But here we have Fridays. Every Friday we're doing something. So we've had the first Friday, we have a professional lecture, David Anderson, who did the most extensive modeling of the Eastern Seaboard and published on that. He was our first speaker, how to get around the 101 of modeling. I've never heard of fuzzy modeling before. I presumed it was always fuzzy, but now it's an actual technical term I know of. And these are upcoming events for Nahar, K through 12, how to have lesson plans targeted at heritage at risk. Oh, and you guys are gonna like this one. You like me telling you what you're gonna like, but let's see, it's at the bottom. Kyra Letke, if you know her, she's gonna talk about changes in coastal gopher tortoise burrow characteristics following hurricanes. And she is a student of Barbara Blonder at Flagler College. So probably very integrated with what you all are doing. But, you know, in Scotland, all their, like 85% of their rabbits disappeared. And that's due to climate change. So looking at, oh my God, the gopher tortoises we see, you see them environmentally and think one thing, we see them and think, why are they digging into our sites and stop digging up bones and people and stuff. But it's really fascinating to think of what we can learn and how the gopher tortoises are reacting and then map that into that. So don't want to confuse folks, but if you are super nerd for this stuff, you're welcome to join us. It's like a feel-good Friday because we have our own party of people who are dedicated to being upbeat about this terrible thing happening, but we're gonna have a good time while doing. I'm gonna pause my throat. Any other questions or comments people wanted to make?
I wasn't sure how much time we had left, but I figured if anyone was interested, I can show you guys Shell Bluff on the ARCHES database. And you can see some of the changes over time if anyone likes that idea. I think it's 222. We can do a thumbs up. All right. Sarah thumbs up and she's telling everyone what you're going to like anyways. So I'm going to assume that she is correct. So I'm going to share my screen again here and pull up the right form. I just had this up. All right, guys, come on. I don't want to share that screen. So we're just going to share my second screen, but I'm going to minimize you guys and pull up the HMS form. If you guys can see this, so this is the site file for.
Hey, Emma, it doesn't look like you're sharing your screen right now.
Okay. What did I do here? There we go. Share screen. There we go. Now it comes up. We're good.
Yep, there you go.
Perfect. So this is the Shell Bluff Landing site file. So we have SJ32, and you can see all of the listings of monitoring visits, which actually I feel like we're missing some because I was definitely out there with you guys before. So we'll have to work on that, hunting some down. But you can click on, oh wait, load 10 more. Oh, there we go. I didn't even notice that. Okay, yes, we've been out here a whole bunch of times. So you can go through and see who people were out with, all that good stuff. I select, let's see now which one's officially the newest one, which I think would be us going out in October of last year. So we'll click on that form. And you can see all of our monitoring photos here. I think this is when we actually filmed the video. You can see our lovely flooding here that had occurred, but I'm gonna quick go through here. So of course our poor well, and I think we were just after high tide. Trying to get to a specific photo if I have it, because I pulled up others. Ooh, it was also the boat wake. Man, that was intense. Let's see, might not have photographed what I wanted to show you guys. Ooh, we had some nice redware in the water. And these are all artifacts at this point. Some cool bone. Just gonna keep scrolling through here. Don't think this is Emma's favorite pottery is redware with the lead glazed, just because you guys need to know that. I also hate teeth, and we found a tooth out there. Okay, so nope, didn't take the exact photo, but what I was gonna pull up is from Jason O'Donoghue's visit in 2017. I had some photos pulled up that showed the shoreline change pretty dramatically. So 2017, as I click through all of these, I had them ready, I swear to you guys. So I wanted to show where the bench was, but here you can see dry land for the well. I think I'm gonna get further this way. Okay, what did I do?
Can look at all of them on the bottom and then just pick the photo.
Okay, oh yeah, I can do that. Here's my, as you guys watch me scroll through, I'm trying to find the one with the picnic table. There we go. This is what I was looking for. So you can see, well, not specifically that one. Getting there, it was this one. So you have a picnic table in the background, that tree, and then here we were in 2020. Emily Jane went out, or I think this is even 2019, and a lot of shoreline loss just between 2019, because none of those even tree roots are sticking out, versus, let's double check if this is 2019. I think it's 2019. Yeah, 2019. So 3 years of that loss. I just thought that was pretty impressive. But again, this also shows like taking photos, going out here and looking at your previous visits, because getting this angle versus this angle is a little different. So you can try to replicate someone else's photographs. So just figured I'd show you guys just some of that. But if you get in and you can get assigned Shell Bluff Landing as your site to go monitor, and you can join in on all of these other monitoring forms and add your name. Vicky, yeah, I see you.
I have a question, and I'm a NER volunteer, but I'm not very familiar with the whole field of historic preservation, so I'm finding this very interesting. But I'm curious, this is a monitoring program, but we can see, for example, at the well, there's quite a bit of deterioration. Does somebody take this monitoring information and at some point maybe go out and try to do something drastic to stop deterioration? I mean, what does this monitoring feed into something bigger that is more aggressive in terms of preservation?
I'll start with an answer. I'm sure others can clean it up for me. It's like yes and no. I think some of the recommended steps, it's a process that is happening, and even if action is taken, it's still happening. And often the action can cause more acceleration than intended. So Emma showing Jason O'Donoghue is a good example of monitoring led to the state coming out to look at those column samples and assess a little more what was happening. So it does trigger some more attention and activity when wanted by the state for actions they may take. I think for the well, we know that's been an ongoing issue for a long time. We had Tom and Joe of Scotland who came out that took basically a cairn. It's a longer story than a cairn, but just imagine a cairn deteriorating on a beach, and they reconstructed it somewhere else. So I really wanted them to see the well and the plans that have come up of what are the affordances of constraints of when you do that aggressive modification on heritage. So I think, we are the citizen science arm to try and give the data to help with data-driven solutions and help people make informed decisions. But those decisions are not ours to make. And maybe Caitlin can speak more, or Abby, of where monitoring has kind of met the pavement with actions taken out at the NER, but at other sites, it has and it hasn't. I think because for an immediate response, people want hardscaped retention things. And I think the NER has done such a lovely job with living shorelines, with things that are more sustainable and take a lot more time to get invested in. But we are showing, this is a good answer perhaps, maybe, is we're seeing more and more that earthworks are doing so much better than we thought. And Emily Jane found a rice dam last week at Talbot. And I thought, what a great name for a paper. Like, the berms are all right. Just saying things that were meant to be in the marshes and staying put, built out of earth that allowed the water to do what water does, are doing much better than hardscape things or solutions that might trap the water in. So there are land managers using the monitoring data. Another good example is over in the west, like in Sarasota County. The Sarasota County Preservation Planner has gone hot for arches and is now putting everything in there and using it as a major management tool. So it's for land managers to use as they see fit, and they have large management plans, of which usually archaeology is a little teeny part. But I think at the NER, and maybe this is where I can stop speaking and throw it over to you all, it's maybe not that the archaeological sites are the priority for being saved, but if we know where they are and we see their deterioration, there's usually a more larger environmental scope happening where they can overlay strategies to help protect the environmental and the cultural. Does that make sense? Does that sound right, Caitlin? If you want to clean up my language there of how I said that is my understanding, especially at the NER.
No, I think that was a very good synopsis. I know that back in the 80s, this has been erosion at the peninsula, along the peninsula, has been a challenge for a very long time. And I know that there have been, shoreline management techniques that have been tried along this part of the shoreline, and it's very challenging because it is a high energy shoreline. So a lot of the traditional shoreline management techniques have failed just because of the amount of boat wake, and just wind and wave energy. So that is something that the reserve is, we are looking at that. We're looking at oyster restoration projects and finding that balance between a true living shoreline and a hybrid version of a harder structure with living shoreline components. And everything at the reserve is driven by science and data and research. And so we are still learning about our shoreline and how to best manage it and where restoration should take place. So at this point in time, being able to monitor this site is very important while we are still looking into options.
Well, and I think just to kind of echo things that both of you have said, with archaeological sites, you know, we know that they're, you know, it's kind of like this whole project. So you start with like modeling. So we think we understand the scope of the thing, but we have no idea. And we are only just now starting to go out and ground truth and see, you know, see what's actually happening. So we can tell you, oh, we think 4,000 archaeological sites are at risk for sea level rise. But, you know, we went out to Anastasia State Park yesterday and we had like the 2-meter rise model already happening on the ground out there, you know. So, so I mean, this is, you know, all to say that this is very, you know, the first steps. And I think as a field, even archaeology, we're just starting to kind of get all of our ducks in a row. And then, you know, to do something about the issue, you know, a lot of ways it's you know, the realities of archaeology is very costly. It's very expensive to go do all this work. And even if we took one banker's box full of samples and artifacts from each one of those 4,000 sites that are at risk, that's 4,000 bankers boxes that we now have to curate and care for in perpetuity. And so what do we do with all of that material and what does that look like? And we have colleagues, you know, that's part of why this Nahar group has come together is, you know, we're doing kind of, we have a colleague in Georgia who's an expert at doing these modeling techniques and refining them and not just having bathtub and taking into a lot of different things into account to really get good models. We have really kind of taken the forefront with doing the citizen science and trying to ground truth those models. And our colleagues in South Carolina, there's a site called Pocky Island shell ring that they kind of knew was there, but didn't really know was there until 2015. And I mean, the site is like half gone at this point. Like it's just the shoreline there is like the highest rate of erosion in the entire state. And so they've really taken a lead of like, you know, we just got to get out there and start grabbing all of the data. And so they're doing this full data recovery. But I mean, it takes tons of people, it takes tons of funding, and they have all sorts of partnerships with the public, with universities, with field schools to bring in lots of folks to come and help. But I mean, it's a huge undertaking. So we're all kind of trying to learn from each other, you know, and trying to kind of put all of these pieces together to figure out the next step. And what do we do? And while we're doing all this, you know, shell bluffs are eroding away. So the idea of going out and getting any kind of information and any kind of record is, you know, we're at least kind of preserving this information as it's going away. And I'll touch, Chris asked, you know, what is happening to the artifacts that we're finding at the sites. It's like a catch and release program. So we photograph them all. We have not collected anything. I think the reserve staff have collected some materials, but I mean, we don't collect things, right? Especially as FPAN, especially as our citizen scientists, we don't collect anything. And so we just photograph them. And, you know, once again, thinking about these boxes, anytime you pick something up, you now have to care for it in perpetuity. So it has to go live somewhere. And, you know, oftentimes the data you get from an artifact really comes from its exact context. So once it's eroded out of the shoreline, you know, it's cool to know, and we can get a little bit of information and get some time frames, or maybe, you know, it was imported from here, or this shows that they were eating this kind of animal. But those artifacts don't have as much data as if we had found it like in situ in the ground, you know, next to the soil, next to all sorts of other artifacts, you know, inside of features or, you know, things like that. So we just photograph them, and from the photographs, we can get all of that data. You know, we can see what kind of pottery it is. We can figure out how old it is and who might have used it and what they were doing with it. But we just leave them there.
Well, I was going to add just 2 things to what Emily Jane said. Ties back to the importance of ground truthing, and that photo I just showed that she was mentioning. You know, this is out at Anastasia, and this is where the 2-foot model has water. So there's already standing water there all the time. So trying to figure out the ground truthing of the models. Are we more advanced now? A lot of these models came out 5 years ago or more. So it's very likely that we are now in the 2-foot rise, and there maybe even 3-foot rise. So there we want to start mapping to see how that looks. And the water is not coming from the shore, it's coming from underneath. And when we've been doing some digital scanning, Emily, Jane, and Emma primarily, they scanned Bulow, and what was just a moment for us. And that's a beautiful site to go monitor and go take a look. But when they did the scanning and printed out the site, there's a hole in the model where Emma's going to show you where the ground level is just that low. So it shows you in a much different way where the water is coming from. And it's not just sea level coming up from the shore. It comes from below and how the water table is impacting a lot of these sites. If you look at the 2 foot, 3 foot, whatever model you're looking at, because of our coastal dune geology, we don't go like a bathtub like this. We have these striations that start to rise all around us because of the ancient dune structure. So that's part of the ground truthing. But the other side of HMS is, as was said at the very beginning, it's a community-based community engagement program. And all this data, all these numbers is great, but we need to know from you, we need to hear from you what matters to you in your community. I think the NER really took the lead on this with the Planning Matanzas. We would like that all to have been about heritage resources because we're the heritage jerks, but we're like, oh, how to do that and really capture everyone's sense and feeling of what's the important story to tell of the NER, of other sites people work at 100 years from now. Who are those groups using them? And it's much more diverse than we think. So how to get all those voices in. And that's another part of HMS that is much better done face-to-face, but the NER has been a partner with us in those community conversations at several locations. So, and that will tie into regional information. A lot of in Florida is done on a regional basis more than anything else. So we hope to bring that to the table. So go outside and bring a form and just start checking boxes and send you swag, swag, swag. But not on state land. Don't go do that on state land. Not right now. But I'll be out. We're going to go to Fish Island on Wednesday, mostly with the SAAA board. But if anybody wanted to shoot, let's pick on Robbie. She's on the board. Shoot Robbie an email if you really want to come out and volunteer that day. And we'll sneak you under the wing to come out and monitor at Fish Island on next Wednesday. Then the following Wednesday, we'll be meeting back at Anastasia at the Spanish Quarry. If people want, yesterday, oh, gorgeous sunny day, as you saw from the pictures. Kelly, Steve, but we left a couple sites just to get back to on the 10th. So anyone's welcome to join us on that walkabout and help us fill out some forms that day. And we'll be back at the NER soon enough, as soon as we get those 2 ones done. Yes, Vicki.
Unfortunately, I am sitting in Northern Virginia right now, but I live walking distance to Fish Island. I mean, is that someplace you go to regularly?
We will now. You mean in St. Augustine?
Yeah, I actually live in St. Augustine, but I have a better chance of getting my vaccine up here where I moved from, and we still have a house, and so we go back and forth.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, since I'm not going to be there next week, but do you go there regularly?
Yes, we have a permit right now that allows us through, I think, end of July to be out and monitoring. So if you're here between that time and we have access, we'd love to take you out. The SAAA is the St. Augustine Archaeology Association. I think some of you are familiar, but they have regular meetings, and many of them were on the Save Fish Island, and they're trying as an organization to figure out where they are in that place. So we want to assist them any way we can. So we're going to go out with them, and that would be the best conduit for future. But yeah, they are going to be doing interpretive signage.
I think the county's about to open it as a park to the public, aren't they?
It's the city managing it for the state now.
Oh, the city is going to do it. Okay.
Try and clear up that permitting. I mean, that has been, You know, we should have a Zoom on me complaining about permits and nobody will come, but it'll give me an hour of time just to be like, rah, 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 permit. But yeah, it was an interesting permit to get. In Virginia, there's.
All right. Is there any additional tips or tricks from our FPAN team for getting started with HMS? I know Emily Jane has been sharing a lot of links in the chat box, and we'll make sure that those also come to you all through email, so that way you can quickly reference them. Anything else? Yeah.
I think the hardest part is just breaking the seal and getting out there. And once you do it once, you're like, oh, this is easy and a beautiful way to spend the day and with other people often. And pandemic times aside, it's easier to do than perhaps is explained in 2 hours, but it's good and good for you. Get out there. I was trying to show you my dog, but she was just like, I am now screen shy and will hide under the table.
All right. Well, we will stay on for a little while, but I do want to go ahead and say thank you so much to our workshop leads from the Florida Public Archaeology Network. Thank you for joining us today and sharing more about Heritage Monitoring Scouts and the ARCHES database, which is always an exciting thing to look at. And I enjoyed learning about the new reporting form that has gone a long way since we started several years ago. So it's exciting to see the changes. For those of you who have joined us today, thank you all for being with us. And we hope that you take the opportunity to become a Heritage Monitoring Scout and get more involved with our Florida Public Archaeology Network.